Hello everybody. So I am back with another overview declutter situation. Let's just dive in. So as you can see, this is blush slash, I have a couple of bronzer things here. So this is all drugstore stuff. I don't think I've ever owned a high-end blush, mostly because I find the drugstore blushes to be superb and I don't really need to spend that extra money when I am perfectly satisfied with this sort of stuff. But I do have a decent amount and I'm just kind of checking in to see if there's anything I can get rid of, stuff I don't use that often, or if I have color dupes. So that's what we'll be playing with today. Now I think I'm going to start with swatching the bronzers that I have because I don't have very many. This is one of my favorites. This is from the Sunset Junction palette, Blush and Glow Trio from Wet n Wild. It was a limited edition palette, I believe in 2015. It's a really great bronzer. It has a nice kind of yellowy undertone, which goes well with my skin. It has a little bit of a sheen. It's not sparkly, it's not shimmery, but it has a very natural looking sort of sheen. And then also from Wet n Wild, I have this makeup stick in the shade Call Me Maple. I'm sure everybody's sick of me talking about that shade. This product, I love it. I love it. It's been in a bunch of favorites. I have a whole video on those makeup sticks, which I will link somewhere. So that's, as you can see, obviously it's a cream product, so it's different in that way, and it's definitely darker. Now the other bronzer sort of products I have are from this e.l.f. contour palette. I have a feeling that I can, oh, hey, it's my creepy face. I have a feeling I can cut down on these e.l.f. quads. So I do want to swatch these out. I don't use them very often. I never use this highlight. I actually forgot that it was in here. This is kind of a setting powder, which I never use. This is the closest thing I have to a contour in my collection right now. And then this bronzer I have used before, but again, I don't tend to reach for it. So that contoury shade is definitely a little bit cooler than this. I would not be comfortable contouring with this necessarily. I don't think so. I might, we'll see. Let me swatch this highlighter just for fun. Although I'm pretty sure I can get rid of it just because I never use it. It is pretty. These are good palettes. I do like them, but I don't need 3 of them in my collection if I can kind of cut them down to 1 or 2. So those are the bronzers that I have. Definitely keeping this, and then I think we can probably adjust that a little bit. While we're on the bronzers, I have, e.l.f. came out with 2 blush palettes. One is light and one is dark. So this is the light palette, and it has a kind of bronzery shade in there. If you saw my most recent tutorial thing using the Wet n Wild Temporary Solutions palette, I used this as my bronzer, and it was nice. It was nice. It definitely has a little bit more of a kind of orangey tone to it. It's not something that is, I don't know, it's definitely different than the other bronzers. It's relatively close to the Sunset Junction one, so I could probably get rid of that if I wanted to. The other blushes in this palette are definitely pretty, and I have used them, but so this corally one has glitter in it, which is not my favorite thing. It's kind of deeper mauvey rose, and then there's this brighter, paler pink. They're definitely pretty shades, but we'll see if we can maybe cut these down a little bit. This dark blush palette I really love. This is more of a winter product for me. Obviously, you know, I have very pale skin, so I gotta be easy with these products. Similar to the light palette, there's one sparkly shade, and it's this one. The glitter is definitely chunkier in that shade, I think. They're really pigmented. They're much more pigmented than the light palette, I find, and a little bit more powdery. I have to be very careful with them, is really what I'm trying to say. They're really beautiful shades, and like I said, I really love to use this in the wintertime. So I'm just going to let those hang out there for a moment, but I think I can consolidate a few of those together. Let me swatch these cream blushes out. This is the Wet n Wild Makeup Stick in Floral Majority. It is a matte shade. Very similar to that shade in the e.l.f. dark palette. So that's good to know. And then this one is in Hustle and Glow. This is shimmery and very orange, which I like, if I'm honest. Got a nice golden sheen. It works well with my skin, although it won't work well with everybody's skin. I think if you're more cool toned, that will look not great. Next up, I'll swatch the blush that's in this Wet n Wild trio. All of those are so beautiful and creamy feeling. It's a really pretty blush, and as you can see, I hope, it has a little sheen to it that just looks really nice and glowy on the skin. All right, next let me swatch the rest of these Wet n Wild blushes. This first one is in the shade Mellow Wine. This is a nice neutral, almost kind of terracotta-y shade. It's definitely, I think it's pretty unique to my collection, although again it looks quite similar to the blush that was in the e.l.f. dark palette, so it's looking like I could get rid of one of them. Next here we have Heather Silk. Now this is one of the older blushes before they reformulated and repackaged. Well, I don't know if they reformulated actually, but they definitely repackaged. This is just a nice kind of medium toned pink. Which is pretty similar. It's definitely a less pigmented version, I think, of this one from the, oh, would be helpful if I was in frame, wouldn't it? It looks like a less pigmented version of this shade from the e.l.f. dark palette. And then we have Pearlescent Pink, which is a classic from Wet n Wild. It's that nice corally shade with a golden shimmer. It's fine enough that I think I can say shimmer. It's not chunky glitter like the ones in the e.l.f. palette. But it's freaking beautiful, quite frankly. And that actually segues very nicely into the Milani blushes. So I have 4 of the rose blushes and 2 of the baked. I'm going to start with this blush. This is in Blossom Time Rose, and it is a very similar theme to the Pearlescent Pink. It's that kind of corally pinky shade with a golden shimmer to it. Now these I might have to build up a little bit because they're not quite as heavy duty pigmented as the, ooh, circling around, as the Wet n Wild blushes, which I actually kind of prefer. In a blush, it's nice to have a little bit more control. So you can see it looks, compared to the swatch anyway of the Pearlescent Pink, it looks a little wishy-washy. But they're a very similar shade. This definitely has a lot more coral to it, I think. It's definitely a brighter look. But if I'm completely honest, I prefer the formula of the rose blushes. So I think we can probably declutter the Pearlescent Pink. Now, over time, I've had some of these rose blushes since they launched. This is pretty recent to my collection, but the rest of them I've had for at least a year. And this one has gone a little funky, so I think I can just get rid of it for that sake. And this is in the shade Tea Rose. I don't know why. I haven't had an issue with any of these other blushes, but you can, I'm sure, see how there's this discoloration around. I'm not sure how or why that's happened. I mean, I can scrape it off, but it it started to smell a little fun. It smells like a doctor's office. It has that kind of hospital-y smell, and it doesn't perform as well as I would like it to. Now, what's unfortunate is I love the color. It's a really pretty color, and it's similar, if you can see, to that. It actually looks like a mix between the two pink shades that were in the e.l.f. palette. But I think I can declutter it just because it seems like it's not up to par with the rest of them. I know someone had commented on one of my videos that they had an experience with these, with these rose blushes where it didn't smell good and it was off, and so I guess that's something that happens with these blushes. I don't know. This is the first I'm having that experience with it. This next one is in the shade Romantic Rose, and this is a really great blush when you just need a little something on your cheeks, but maybe you've gone heavy on the eyes or heavy on the lips and you just want something very neutral. That is my perfect kind of go-to if I don't know what I'm doing or if I just need a little something. Love that one. And then this is one of my favorite blushes that I own if I was, really brutal and would only let myself keep like 1 or 2, maybe 3 blushes. This would definitely be one of the ones that I keep. This is in the shade Coral Cove. This is a really great both summer and winter blush, actually. It just gives that really beautiful kind of vibrant flush to the cheek, you know what I mean? Okay, and last two I want to swatch. This is a classic. This is the Baked Blush in Luminoso. Now, this is one of those products that was really hyped up on YouTube years ago, and it's one of those things that either will work for your skin tone or not. Very similar to Hustle and Glow. Luminoso has a lot more, it's a lot softer. You can see the difference between Luminoso and Hustle and Glow. That definitely has a lot more orange to it, and this is a little peachier. It's got a really pretty sheen. I love that. I love that blush. And then this last one is called Dolce Pink. Now, I bought this because I had read it is a dupe for NARS Orgasm. I don't know if that's true or not. I've never used NARS Orgasm, and I won't be since they are no longer cruelty-free. Good job, NARS. But it's a very, it's swatched on my finger really nice, but as I'm blending it into my arm, all you can really see is a slight bit of pink and a lot of sparkle. I can definitely declutter this. I don't reach for it very often. The color is nothing revolutionary, and it's just too sparkly. Now, these three I know that I love, and I'm keeping. Luminoso I know I love, and I'm keeping. Sunset Junction I know I love, and I'm keeping. Now, what's cool about these quads is that these pop out. Varying degrees of difficulty, granted, but they do pop out. So I can mix and match. But I can safely, I think, get rid of this whole quad. I never contour. I don't feel the need to keep this. If I get back into a contouring phase, I'll get another contour. So this can go. And now, as far as these actual blush palettes, I know that this dark palette I really, really like, but I don't love the glitter. I'm so nervous about popping this shade out. Oh God. Okay. Okay. So this is from the e.l.f. Dark Palette, and this is Mellow Wine. They are close enough to be dupes. So I can get rid of Mellow Wine, even though, I mean, this is a really beautiful blush. I like the formula. I like the formula of both of these. These tend to be a little bit drier, which I find that makes them a lot easier to work with. They all blend beautifully, but just because I'm decluttering, well, any of these doesn't mean I necessarily don't like them, but there's no reason to have two of pretty much the same color. So that can go. And then Heather Silk was very close. actually, well, very close to that shade. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna declutter Heather Silk. I was thinking, I like this shade, this kind of bright pink, but this particular blush out of all of these products is not my favorite. It's very dry. It takes a lot to build up, so I think I'll just put this on a list of a blush I want to get, this kind of shade in a brighter formula. So I'm gonna stick this shade that was the dupe for Heather Silk into the dark palette. That came out a lot easier. Stick that in there. And that can go as well. And all of these I know that I love and I will keep. So just to recap, I am keeping all 3 of these Wet n Wild makeup sticks. I personally really like the cream formula. I like cream products a lot, especially with cheek skin products. I am keeping 3 of my Milani Powder Rose blushes. Romantic Rose, which is that really beautiful neutral shade. Coral Cove, which is one of my favorite blushes of all time. And then Blossom Time Rose, which is my kind of preferred peachy with a golden sheen. Definitely keeping Sunset Junction because I love all 3 of those products. Luminoso is an old standby. And I was able to consolidate 3 of these e.l.f. blushes, blush/contour palettes into one. This is mostly shades from the dark blush palette, just because they're different in my collection, with one I added in from the light palette. So I am letting go of 2 of these e.l.f. quads, one of the blush palettes. It's mostly the light palette with the sparkly shade that was in the dark one. It is a really pretty shade, but I just can't, I don't use it because of, look at how chunky the glitter is. No, thank you. Also decluttering this e.l.f. contour palette. I have bronzers that I prefer. I never use this highlight. I never use this setting powder, and I don't really contour, so I don't need this in my collection. I am decluttering this Milani Rose blush in Tea Rose. It's a beautiful color, but it's just gone a little funny, so I don't need that. Decluttering this Milani Baked blush in Dolce Pink. It's too glittery and not pink enough. It would probably be a nice highlight, but it's too, like, actually sparkly rather than shiny, if that makes sense, for my tastes. And then I'm unfortunately decluttering these Wet n Wild blushes, not because they're terrible, but because I have dupes already for these products. So these shades, Mellow Wine, Heather Silk, and Pearlescent Pink. These 2 blushes are very similar to shades in the blush palette. That's obviously a lot more economical size-wise. And then Pearlescent Pink is just a much more intense and corally version of the Blossom Time Rose. You can see the difference right there. And I just find I like the formula of the Milani blush more. This is great, but it is very tricky to work with. You can see how pigmented that is. So if you really like pigmented blushes, the Wet n Wild ones are great. If you have kind of a heavy hand, you'd be careful, is all I'm gonna say. Yay, so that's a lot more room for more stuff. That's exciting. I hope this was interesting, entertaining. Maybe it inspired you to go through some of your products to see if there are places you can get rid of things. Maybe you find things that you want to get. And you can be a little bit more intentional in your purchasing. So thank you very much for watching. I'm going to go take a shower now. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.